Hey everyone. So as you guys know, on this podcast, we land up talking a lot about the life sciences, and we talk about things that impact the life sciences, including clinical trials. Today's podcast is going to be talking about what are clinical trials like from the perspective of a site who is doing oncology. It's a multi-location site, if you will, and we have with us Kathleen Hurtado. Kathleen, I believe I know you're a pharmacist, but is it a PharmD or is it RPH?
RPH.
Okay, so we have Kathleen with us, and Kathleen is unusually a pharmacist, which I know for me at least, that was something when I was going through pharmacy school, I always wanted to ask to talk to people who've done the going down that pathway of being a pharmacist in clinical research. I never found one. And the ones that I did find really ended up being more people who mix up the drugs as opposed to people who actually administer the site. So Kathleen is what I think of as a unicorn. So I'm really, really excited to have Kathleen. So Kathleen, welcome. I
Thank you.
and this is my name is Darshan Kulkarni. This is Darshan Talks. This is Kathleen Hurtado. Kathleen, introduce yourself, please.
So thank you, Darshan. Really nice to be here with you today. So you kind of already did it. My name is Kathleen Hurtado, and I am the AVP of Research Administration for Cancer Treatment Centers of America. And I've had a very, blessed career, very, varied career, but started out as a oncology pharmacist at MD Anderson, my first job out of pharmacy school. So, and have had lots of different things all the way around, and kind of ended up serendipitously here. So,
I, I'm not going to let you go that easily because we are all
okay,
interested in how does
okay.
someone go from pharmacy school to running a clinical research site. Because personally, like I said, you're the unicorn. How did you even think? Did you even think you'd land up here?
Oh no, never. I loved being a pharmacist and thought that's what I would do for the rest of my life. But it was just very serendipitous. So and working at MD Anderson, worked in pediatrics, and we had a lot of sales reps come and call on us.
Yeah.
And so one of them was I got to be friends with her, and she kept saying, "Oh, you should come into sales. You should come into sales." And I was like, "No way," because I'm really pretty much an introvert by nature, and so it was something I could just never see myself doing. And so at the time, that company was starting an oncology sales force. And so they were looking for people that knew oncology pharmacists, oncology nurses, because they knew that to go out to doctors, you had to be able to speak to the
Right.
science. So I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to go interview, because what's the worst possible thing that can happen? The worst possible thing that can happen is I try to do it. I don't like it. I go back to being a pharmacist. I
Yeah.
knew I loved that. I could always go back and do that. And as it turns out, I was actually good at it. Which I would never, ever have expected.
So
And
you
I
were a
think
sales rep.
I started out as a sales rep. I started out carrying the bag. So,
Wow.
yeah, in fact, I had a 5-state a territory. So I had Minnesota, uh, Iowa, Wisconsin, North and South Dakota, and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Oh
And
my
so,
God.
yeah. And so for somebody who'd never driven in snow in their entire life, it was kind of a rude awakening. And I used to scare my district manager half to death, because I was a little bit crazy. It was like, yeah, it's a company car. Let's, spin it and see what happens. So, yeah. But it was great because it got me out of my comfort zone. So
Yeah.
what I learned from that was that, sometimes you have to, you take a risk and do something different. And I always encourage people to, try something new. Like, be the one that volunteers to do something in your place if they're looking for somebody. Even though, it might be extra work or whatever, you may not know, but you're not going to find out. And this actually turned out to be great for me. And I ended up going from a sales rep to a district manager to head of pharmacy relations to sales and marketing for international, US. And then when I left there, I did a startup, biotech. So I went out and raised venture capital.
Oh my God.
Um, and then serendipitously, after doing a startup, I was in line at the airport getting ready to fly to Singapore to, beg for more money. And I met who I ultimately married, my husband, in line at the airport. And after we sold the assets to a larger biotech company, I decided, okay, well, maybe it was time at 45 to settle down. And so I moved to Southern California. And through all my interactions throughout my career, I'd met lots and lots of people, and I'd met some doctors, and they knew me, and they said, hey, we have an opening at USC. We need somebody that, understands how to run this as a business. And a lot of people don't like thinking about clinical trials as a business. It makes it sound like, it's a dirty word, like it's a business. And what I try to tell people is, in anything that you do, you can be non-for-profit or whatever, but if you don't make money at it, you're not going to be in it for a long time. And I don't care if you're, selling lemonade on the corner, or, oil, or drugs, or clinical trials. You have to treat it as a business, or you are not going to be successful. You're not going to be able to do that. And, I don't have an MBA. I never, took those kind of classes in school. I learned along the way, and I did take some classes online for myself, because I was in these positions where, now you're all of a sudden having to go beg for money. You need to understand how to read a P&L and all that kind of stuff. So again, push me out of my comfort zone, because I'm one of these people that always had to write out all the math questions and everything, because I didn't want to rely on doing it in my head. And so I would say, just get involved in things. And in fact, one of the things I did when I was at the pharmaceutical company is they always had an internship for pharmacists in drug information and manufacturing, like, snooze fest, right? So I actually started an internship in marketing, in sales and marketing. So so the pharmacy students could get to see a different side of what happens in a pharmaceutical company. And I'm very proud to say that a couple of my students are now directors and vice presidents at pharmaceutical companies. So, very gratifying. Yeah. So I don't know that they, continued it after I left, because I think you need somebody that's passionate about it. And I sat on the board of my alma mater. So I was able to, get those students, but I think they had a really fun time. In fact, I know after the first year, we had a ton of people that wanted to do it. And so I would say, if you're interested, call somebody that and say, hey, can I just come and, hang out with you guys for a while, see what's going on. But don't be afraid to take some risks, which is what I did. I look at everything in life that way. It's like, okay, I'll do this. What's the worst possible thing that can happen? I don't like it. I'll go back. As long as nobody gets hurt, and you don't mortgage your house and, lose lose all your money or something, taking a risk, it's worth it to try something new.
So did you do a similar internship when you started running that multi-center location? You just mentioned running their clinical trial facility.
Yeah.
And what sort of, was it difficult to do? Like or you were just, at that point, you've done it once, you knew the hurdles, it was time to move on to something different.
Yeah, actually, the way I got here is, so when I took the job at USC, so if you ever work in academia, you know that when new deans come in, new deans bring, all of their own people most of the time. Yeah. And so for the first time in my life, which was like soul crushing to me, I got laid off, and I thought it was the end of the world. And I realized, okay, this is not the end of the world. But I started consulting, and a very good friend of mine, the same thing happened to her. She was at an academic institution and got laid off, and she started a consulting business and needed some help. Yeah. And so I started doing that, and CTCA happened to be one of the clients. And I was helping them interview for somebody that was doing the work that we were doing as consultants. And I made a joke about, well, you're never going to find anybody as good as me. And they said, you're right. Will you come work for us? So that's how I did it. And, managing research, especially the administrative parts of it, it's no different doing it for one site than for 5 sites. And in fact, it makes more sense, so having the 5 sites to centralize all of those administrative functions, because you don't have the redundancies. In fact, one of the things that we were able to show by centralizing the administration is, the budgets were much better. The startup was much faster, because you don't have, somebody that doesn't know how to negotiate a budget or negotiate a contract doing that at the site level. You've got the expertise at a central level. And we did it once. We have one budget, one contract for all of our sites. So there's definitely some efficiencies in that process. And so once you've done it one place, it really is transferable knowledge.
So people always say that. I mean, that was the whole point of the entire SMO model, which was we will add efficiencies. The result, I think this is why SMOs landed up getting a bad name, was that it landed up becoming a bureaucracy. How did you prevent the bureaucracy?
So we don't get involved in the operations. Okay. So we're bookended, right? So we do all the upfront.
Yeah.
And then we do all the back end. So all the claim adjudication and all the financial reconciliation, all that stuff. And then we help with it in the middle. But when you start trying to embed your own staff or start dictating to a clinic or a hospital, you must do these things this way, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work well. And it's very hard to, especially we just have 5 sites, right? But they're in 5 different states.
Right.
Just trying to get, kind of something standardized, it's really hard. So we just don't get into the operations. We say, okay, it's your trial. Now, either you enroll or you don't. We're gonna report out the financials. We're gonna give you all of that, but we can't get into the weeds in terms of how you operationalize that trial at the site, because they have, different doctors, they have different, different states have different rules. Some places nurses can input orders, some places they can't. Some places that have, the pharmacists have to be more involved, some places they don't. So we stay out of those things. We provide all of this infrastructure and support. Now, if they need somebody, we can help them find somebody, but we're not going to dictate how things happen at the site level. Train them, support them, do all of that, but just not get into that weeds. And I think that was, part of the issue is that if you try to go in and then start changing the processes and the workflows that they've already laid out themselves, I think that is not a recipe for success.
So if that's true, which is that's where the problems end up happening, which is people trying to get all involved. How do you handle things like a sponsor audit or a CRO audit? Do they come to you because you have a lot of the paperwork, or do they go to the actual site? And how does that get managed?
So they're going to have to do a little bit of both. But we have, again, everything done electronically. Yeah. So we have the regulatory and the data are centralized.
Yeah.
So, the 2 most important parts, right, where in terms of an audit, because they're looking at the data. So they're looking at their EDC, they're looking at the EMR. And in fact, if you could say, is there a silver lining to COVID, which is kind of hard to even think about, but one of those has been that it has forced the pharmaceutical companies to do remote monitoring, which they've been very reticent to do, even though we've offered it all along. So now they love it, and they come in, they can do it whenever, 2:00 in the morning, if that's what, if they're a night owl or whatever. So we give them access to the EMR. They're able to go in there whenever they need to. Now within a certain period of time. It's very structured in terms of the access, but they can check everything themselves and they're done. We have all of the others, all the regulatory documents are electronic, so it's very simple for them to actually monitor the sites. Now, when they do a PSV or those kind of things, they want to, go to the site. And again, they set that up directly with the site. And again, they're doing that all remotely now. One of the companies has like these fancy glasses that you walk around in and everything's videotaped from the glasses. It's kind of like out of a James Bond movie or something, but so it's, technology has definitely helped that a lot, but yeah, to monitor if the FDA came in, they're going to want to see the physician, and meet those people directly. But a lot of the data elements and the things that they are going to just want to monitor, we would handle.
Okay, so because of the unique structure you have at CTCA, you've been able to get into some really interesting studies, and you and I were speaking about that just a few minutes ago. You recently were involved in a just-in-time trial. So could you talk a little bit more about what a just-in-time trial is, and what makes it unique and what makes it different, and why you guys were the right fit for it?
Sure. So just-in-time studies, typically the manufacturers have only used the just-in-time model for those trials that have been really difficult to enroll, or they're kind of they need like 25 more patients, right? Like, how do we get these last 25 patients in? And so they haven't necessarily used it for, the kind of their whole portfolio of studies. And we like it because now especially with cancer trials, the inclusion criteria has such specificity, especially when you're using, genomics. You see, okay, well, this gene is only present in 3% of patients that have this particular type of disease. So your pool of patients is, shrinks down to like hardly any. So if you were to do that in a normal feasibility, we'd look at it and say, okay, yeah, we only show 2 patients across the enterprise. Well, every once in a while, you might be one of those 2 patients. But if I'm doing this as a regular, traditional trial, they probably wouldn't have awarded me that trial because we're honest. And so we don't add like the inflation factor, like, oh, it's 2, so maybe we put 6 on the feasibility. If we only saw 2 patients, we put down that we would only ever be able to enroll 2 patients because there's no sense, opening something we can't enroll to. So because of that, you'll sometimes open these trials and they languish. They stay open and we've got 9 months, 12 months, and no patients, right? And that takes, even though you think, oh, well, how much work can it really be? Well, it is. Every time there's an amendment, every time there's any kind of change, you still have to keep up maintenance on that study. So just-in-time model is you don't do anything. You don't open the trial. There's no feasibility process. When you get a patient, you fill out a form, you send it in, they say, yep, the patient qualifies, and booyah, it's now all hands on deck. And so we can have a study from the time we've identified the patient to the time that the patient is actually dosed in 3 weeks, less than 3 weeks, with budget, contract, regulatory, everything completed, SIV, everything done, activation, patient, and share. And we actually did that for a first-in-man phase 1 study. This trial that we just did, we've had 3 patients this week identified, was it's a basket trial. So it's based on the mutation, and based on the mutation, patients get a certain type of therapy. And so serendipitously, when we've had the study now like several months, 3 months, and this week we found 3 patients. So go figure that it all happens. It usually happens right during the holidays. So they actually spared us this time. It was a month later because the last 2 years we've had a just-in-time trial right at the holidays. But we like it because then we're opening a trial that we know we already have a patient. The patient is identified. And so it's not just opening this thing and then having it sitting and, languishing. So, and then things get done faster because everyone's aligned around the same goal because there's a patient sitting there waiting to be dosed.
Now, here's the question though. When you're telling the sponsor that you have a patient, are you saying that I have a patient who qualifies? Or are you saying you have a patient who actually wants the drug or wants to be in the study?
Both.
Okay, so you're not going, I have 100 potential patients, 30 of them may actually want to participate. You're saying I have 4 patients, all who are interested in the study.
Right. We only contact them when because they, if you have it's the inclusion exclusion, but it's all there. But we've already approached the patient. So we only send that in when we know the patient definitely wants to participate. And from our perspective, they meet all the criteria. It always has to be approved by the sponsor first. So
have you been in a situation where you spoke to the patient, they were interested, and now the sponsor goes, I'm not interested?
No.
Okay, fair enough. So it's one of those situations that sponsors are going, I'll take the patient because I need the information. Yeah. I just wonder if that's an awkward conversation. That was my.
Yeah, no, I think that they do that, put it in that model. Now, it may be that the patient may not qualify. There might be some nuance about, oh, you guys, like we did have one where we read it, because some of these mutational things, you read these reports and I mean, they're beyond me, right? Like this is rearrangement and it's an exon 14, but it should be an intron 13. And you're like, oh my God, I wish I would have paid better attention during all those classes. But so every once in a while, even though on the report, like the foundation report or everyone, it'll say like, here's a study for this patient. When you actually get down and really into the specificity of that mutation, that genomic mutation, and it'll say, yeah, no, this one doesn't qualify. A rearrangement is not a fusion, or a fusion is not a rearrangement, or whatever. So, but that happens just, every once in a while, not often, thankfully.
How do you handle that conversation at that end? Because the patient obviously at this point is going, these are one of my last options.
Yeah. It's difficult. It's difficult. But, but then we say to them, okay, well, we have a couple things. We can look for another study, or we'll try to get you this drug, because in a lot of cases, like for the TAPER trial, for instance, with ASCO, although that's not a just in time, but in a lot of cases, those drugs are already FDA approved. And so we'll say, okay, we'll try to get you that drug off label. We have through our precision medicine group, we have a medication acquisition program where we help patients, get a drug, and we put together the whole, package that shows, their foundation report, and then data that would support the drug in that particular indication. So we will help them that way if we can't get them into the study.
So I don't know if you follow the clinical trial guru, but there's a guy called Dan Safara, and he's looking at this right now. He's loving it. So thank you, Dan, for participating. So keep it going is what he's saying. The other thing that you guys have going on, based on the conversation we just had, was you guys are looking at a new CTMS system, a clinical trial management system.
Right.
How has that been? What has the change been like?
So, well, one of the things I told somebody, they were saying, "Oh, is this the right system?" I just said, "Well, if you guys want me to retire early, you will have me do another CTMS implementation, because that will be my key cue to retirement." The CTMS itself is great. It's just, when you are integrating an old system into a new system, the integration was not optimal. I mean, it probably, in retrospect and in hindsight, it probably would have been better just to rebuild those trials in the new system individually, as opposed to try to get all that data coming over, because it just that part did not go well. But we love the system itself. It is a suite of products, and so we've got the CTMS, we've got the regulatory, we're going to do eSource. And it has ePay, and it's got eConsent. So our next one is eSource, then we go to eConsent, and then we can do ePay at any point in time. We just haven't done it yet because of some banking things organizational things. But it's got that as well, and very simple to implement. But it can be overwhelming because it's got so much functionality that you want to do everything at one time, right? And so you have to keep, especially when you've got people that love technology on your team. So I have to keep them focused. All right, we're going to learn how to build a study in here, and then we're going to learn how to add a patient, and then we're going to, click on the completed visits, and then let's get to the scheduling and doing it for pre-screening and adding in, the notes and doing all this other stuff. So we found, we've been playing with reports and stuff, and I mean, you can do it in anything that you want to report on. As long as there's a data element in the system, you can pull out a report on it. So that part of it's really cool, because I have a boss who loves reports and, pie charts, graphs, so anything you can make it so that it's all pretty, she loves. So it's perfect for somebody like that. So the transition was painful, but as we're getting through there and cleaning things up, things are definitely getting much better, and it's our source of truth for everything financial. So, we have to have it. It has to work.
But now, when you were, by the way, I have a question already from Dan.
I see that. Yeah.
Do you see the question?
I do.
Okay. Do you know the answer?
I don't know if I can do it in 5 minutes. I can try.
Good.
So TNM just is basically, how big your tumor is, what stage it is, and whether or not it's metastasized, and if you got any, node involvement. So it really just tells you the extent of disease for that particular tumor. And we use RECIST as a way to be able to standardize measurements across all studies so that you can compare one trial to another trial to say, okay, in this study they used this drug from this sponsor, in this study they used this drug from this sponsor, and you can see the response rates because they were all measured using the same methodology, for those radiological measurements. So it allows you to do comparisons across trials because, if you talk to one doctor, if you look at clinical response versus, resist response, they could say, oh yeah, the patient has stable disease. But when you actually measure the tumor with resist measurements, it could have been an increase that would have, demonstrated progressive disease. So that standardization allows you to then compare, patients within a study and then compare study to study. So, but it's a very specific way to measure the tumors.
Pretty sure you made it under 5 minutes.
Yeah, there we go. Hey, I'm remarkable.
I'm going to ask one more question. I know we originally aimed for about 15, 20 minutes, but I'm just curious. When you are dealing with pharmacy, is there a different engagement that you have than when someone else has, only because you've done the job that they were doing? And how is that different? How is that played out?
So I always take care of my pharmacists. So one of the things that I'm very, cognizant of is I make sure I budget really well for them. When we're talking about startup costs and things like that, I always make sure we've got money in there for pharmacy. I try to be very realistic about how much time it's going to take them to do things. And so again, we want to account for that in the budget. And then even in looking at feasibility, I'll look at something and think, okay, like we had a drug, well, you could even look at the vaccine, but we had a drug where once it was thawed, it only had like 4-hour shelf life. Well, do you really want to be playing beat the clock, with an investigational product when there's a lot of things going on in a pharmacy? And so I always look at those kind of things, and I encourage the pharmacists to get out and talk to the patients. If they're willing to do all the ConMed stuff, well, we build it in the budget so that it's at a rate that the pharmacist will do the ConMeds and not a coordinator. And so it's at a different price. But I think it's better for them because, pharmacists know this much better. They're not going to have to go look up like, well, I don't know what this drug was used for. Like why is this here? So, so I try to always take care of my peeps.
Now, of your peeps, I love it. Do you find that? So this is a question I've always wondered. If you're taking care of the pharmacist, how do you actually have a relationship with them that they know that you're the one taking care of them? And how? Because usually the clinical trial site is in one building and the pharmacy is in the basement of another building. I don't know how it is. Well, in your case, it's actually in different states almost. Yeah. So how does that play itself out?
So I have routine calls with them. Oh. So yes, so we have a call. We'll talk about, kind of, are there, any issues? If there's a new study coming out, I'll make sure that, okay, guys, you're going to know about this. We build out order sets so that we put those into the EMR so that things are ordered correctly. So we'll make sure that send that out. Does anybody have any comments? We alert them. Okay, here's new order sets. Every year, so we're getting into that season of budgeting. So I will reach out to them like, hey, how are you guys doing? Do you guys need a new freezer? You need a refrigerator? Are you all set for USP 800? All the things that you might just to make sure that they've got the resources that they need. Because what can sometimes happen is if I can maybe intervene on their behalf to try to get new equipment, or I can show, workload. We show kind of productivity measures. So, how many monitor visits, drug shipments, things like that can help with, productivity measures. So we come back and say, no, we really do need another pharmacist here. This is why. So, but we do have a standing meeting where we just talk about issues and if there's anything else coming up. Like the big one now is whether or not, all the techs, do they all need GCP training? Should they all get it, or should there just be one, or is it really necessary? Can we just train them on the protocol? So that was a topic this last week. So
Last week, what did you guys decide and why?
we decided no, that they did not all need to be. If where we came out was if there is one particular tech that is involved in the studies, and so they're kind of designated as that, then yeah, then maybe that person, it would make sense.
Yeah.
If it's somebody that wants to, again, do more things, learn more, remember, like getting out of their box and learning more, then absolutely, we'll pay for the GCP. If they want to be GCP trained, let's go for it. But
Right.
if it's really, just somebody that, they're helping out, it's really the pharmacist that's doing the mixing, so they're hardly ever in there, then we just say no.
Right.
Just on an as needed basis, train them on the particular protocol if you need to, and then we just document that. So
Very cool. I'm going to summarize what we just discussed. So we talked about your background. We then spoke about just the fact that you went from being an oncology pharmacist to a sales rep, which I would never have guessed, riding all the way up to the top in selling a company. I couldn't tell if it was a pharmaceutical company or if it was it was okay.
It was
a pharmaceutical company. Then going in and starting in clinical research and essentially riding all the way to the top in clinical research. Now at your AVP at Cancer Treatment Centers of America. You talked about your experience doing just-in-time studies. We talked about the challenges associated with having a new CTMS system and what were the advantages of that and the disadvantages. And then talked about your engagement with pharmacy. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
Okay. If they want to reach you, Kathleen, and go, you know what, I need to work with Kathleen. I need to work with Cancer Treatment Centers of America because you guys do just-in-time studies, which are tough to recruit for. How do they find you?
They can just email me.
Okay, and your email address is?
Oh, Kathleen.Hurtado@ctca-hope.com.
Perfect. And this is Darshan Kulkarni with Darshan Talks. And Kathleen, thank you so much. I know you did mention you're an introvert, so I appreciate you coming on. This was absolutely wonderful. It was as good as I thought it would be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty.